All right, everybody, get ready because today we are going deep on something truly different. We're talking Teal organization.
Bill organizations, yeah.
Have you heard this term before?
I have.
It's okay if you haven't, but get ready to have your mind blown because we're talking about workplaces, companies, organizations with no job titles.
Yeah, no bosses.
No bosses.
Can you imagine that?
I'm having trouble, right? Like, how does that even work?
And yet they work.
And they thrive. That's the really wild part. So we're going to try to unpack how that's even possible.
It's pretty amazing.
To guide us, we are turning to a book called Reinventing Organizations by Frédéric Laloux. And we're using, by the way, the illustrated version.
Which I appreciate.
Who doesn't like a good picture?
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier to grasp some of these ideas. So to give you just a little teaser, Laloux's big idea is that human organizations, they evolve in stages, much like we do as humans.
That's right.
Each stage has new ways of collaborating, working together. He takes us way back to what he calls red organizations.
Yeah, so red organizations, if you can imagine, like a wolf pack.
Okay.
Or a street gang.
A little scary.
Yeah. Or even like a pirate ship.
Okay, so we're talking power-driven structures.
Yeah, very much so.
Right.
Where it's like survival of the fittest.
Okay, so then we move on, hopefully evolve a little bit. We get to amber.
Amber organizations.
Now, what's that all about?
So think about traditional armies.
Okay.
The Catholic Church, very much top-down, very clear hierarchy.
Right, so still pretty hierarchical. We've got unquestioned authority at this point.
Unquestioned, a lot of rules. Think about ancient Egypt, building pyramids, like a very clear way of doing things.
Lots of rules, rigid hierarchy. I'm getting some serious Game of Thrones vibes here.
Yeah.
From these first two stages.
Right, well, I was thinking more like Roman Empire.
Okay.
But I like where your head's at.
Yeah, very structured, very top-down.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be real, right?
Oh.
Most of us are probably most familiar with the next stage, what Laloux calls orange.
Orange.
Right.
This is us.
This is the world we live in.
This is it. So this is where meritocracy comes in, innovation, big emphasis on like accountability, efficiency.
Okay.
So we're talking like getting things done,
Yeah.
key performance indicators.
Right.
We've got targets to hit.
Climbing that corporate ladder.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So we're all familiar with this.
I think most of us, have some experience in this realm, whether we liked it or not. And the orange model, it's brought progress, innovation, we got to give it that.
Of course.
But I think we can also all relate to the fact that it can sometimes feel a little impersonal,
A little bit.
Maybe even soul-crushing, a little bit.
Little bit, yeah. I've been there.
Right, like you become a cog in the machine, as they say.
Exactly. And that's where Teal comes in. Laloux argues that Teal organizations are kind of the next stage of evolution.
Right, so instead of that cog in the machine feeling, Teal organizations, he argues, are more like living organisms.
Yes.
Constantly adapting, evolving, and this is really key, where every individual feels deeply connected to the purpose of the work.
Purpose-driven, absolutely. And I think that's the key difference. It's not just about changing structures or like putting on a new coat of paint. It's about fundamentally shifting how we think about organizations, how we think about work, right?
Yeah.
It's like this recognition that people aren't just resources to be managed.
Right.
They're individuals with passions and talents. And when you tap into that, that's where the magic really happens.
So Teal organizations, it sounds amazing, right? Like, in theory, sign me up.
Yeah.
But I think there's probably some folks out there thinking, okay, does this actually work in the real world?
Right.
Like, are there actually companies out there doing this and not just, like, falling apart?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair question.
So the good news is, Laloux gives us some actual examples. This isn't just, like, pie in the sky. He says, look, there are companies, organizations doing this. And one that really jumped out at me was this company, Bertzorg.
Oh, yeah, Bertzorg, yeah.
A Dutch home care organization.
They're like the poster child for Teal.
Okay, so tell me more. What's so special about them?
So picture this. Over 9,000 nurses.
Okay.
And they're all working in these self-managing teams.
Okay, self-managing, so already we're like, what does that even mean?
Right, so there's no, like, regional managers,
Okay.
district managers, none of that.
Wow.
Just these small teams.
Okay.
Like 10 to 12 people.
So just these teams and nurses figuring it out, going to people's homes and taking care of them.
Exactly. Empowered to make their own decisions about how they're going to provide that care.
Okay, I'm already getting stuck on this. 9,000 nurses. And no, like, I mean, in my experience, even a team of like 10 people sometimes feels like too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So how do they keep things from just becoming chaos with that many people and no one like really in charge?
Right. Well, and that's the amazing thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't descend into chaos. In fact, Bertzorg consistently, they're delivering better care
Okay.
at a lower cost than these traditional home care providers. I mean, their rates of like hospital readmissions,
Okay, so that's like a big metric in healthcare.
huge,
Yeah.
significantly lower. Their patient satisfaction is through the roof. And on top of that, they've actually managed to reduce costs for the Dutch healthcare system.
Hold on. So they're doing it better. You're getting better outcomes. Patients are happier and it's cheaper.
And it's cheaper.
That sounds like, are you sure this isn't like a fictional company?
I know. It sounds too good to be true.
That's like the unicorn of healthcare. But right.
But it's real. And I think it really comes down to like those three breakthroughs we were talking about earlier, the self-management, the wholeness, the evolutionary purpose. It's like they're really living those principles.
Okay, so let's break those down because I think like understanding how those high-level principles translate to like what people are actually doing day to day at a place like Bertzorg,
Yeah.
that's what's going to help us wrap our heads around this. So we talked about self-management. What does that actually look like in terms of making decisions? Because, I mean, even in a small team, you can't have everyone just doing whatever they want, right?
Right. And that's where one of the like core practices of Teal organizations comes into play. And it's called the advice process.
Okay, the advice process. So tell me more about that because I'm getting a little tripped up here on how you have no boss, you have all these people.
Sure. So it's actually pretty simple. Let's say you want to make a decision.
Okay.
And that decision might impact other people in the organization.
Okay, makes sense.
The advice process basically says, before you make that decision, you need to seek advice from two key groups.
Okay.
The first group is anyone who will be directly impacted by your decision.
Okay.
And then the second group is anyone who has expertise on whatever it is you're making a decision about.
So instead of going to your boss, you're basically going to your colleagues, the people who it's going to affect, and the people who know stuff.
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it's not about getting permission. It's about making sure that you've considered all angles, that you haven't missed anything.
It's like a built-in system for collaboration and making sure that the decisions are actually good decisions.
Yeah, that's it.
Not just like someone higher up on the food chain saying, yeah, this is fine.
Exactly.
Very different way of thinking about authority, that's for sure. Okay, so we talk about self-management. Let's talk about wholeness because I feel like, to me, when I hear wholeness, I think about like, yoga retreats.
Right.
Meditation.
Sure.
Which, don't get me wrong, that's great. But how does that apply to a workplace?
So I get that. But in the context of Teal, it's not really about like incense and meditation cushions.
Okay.
It's more about creating a workplace where people actually feel safe and encouraged to bring their whole selves to work.
Okay, so not just like your work self, but like all of you.
Exactly. Your
Yeah.
personality, your creativity,
Yes.
even your vulnerability.
So it's like the opposite of that whole like leave your personal life at the door.
Totally.
It's like, no, bring it in. Let's be real here.
Because when people feel like genuinely seen and valued for who they are,
Yeah.
it creates this deeper level of connection.
Right. You're not putting on a front.
Exactly.
Okay. I like this. So we've got self-management. We've got wholeness. Now this third one, evolutionary purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What is an evolutionary purpose when we're talking about a company?
Evolutionary purpose. Okay. I'm not going to lie. That one sounds a little, I don't know, kind of mystical, especially when we're talking about like, a company that makes widgets or whatever. Right.
So break that one down for me. What does evolutionary purpose even mean in that context?
Yeah, so it's definitely a different way of thinking about things. A lot of traditional organizations, they operate from this like really fixed strategy.
Right, like a 5-year plan. We've all seen that.
Exactly. Like they're trying to like steer a ship on this predetermined course.
Right. Got to stick to the plan.
Yeah, but Teal organizations, they take a different approach. It's much more, I don't know, organic, you could say. It's like they're constantly sensing and responding to the world around them.
So instead of being rigid, it's more about being adaptable, kind of going with the flow a little bit.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that like clinging to a fixed plan, it can actually make you less resilient.
Right, because the world changes fast.
Exactly. Teal organizations, they're comfortable with a little uncertainty. They embrace experimentation. They trust that by, really listening to the needs of the organization, the needs of their people, that they can navigate like all the complexity and actually come out stronger.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together, but I think, the big question for a lot of folks listening is like, okay, this sounds great in theory, but what about something as basic as like getting paid.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work in a Teal organization when you don't have a manager who's deciding, like, who gets what?
It's a great question, and Laloux actually addresses this directly. He talks about this company, Morningstar, which is, get this, the world's largest tomato processor.
Okay, I love tomatoes. Tell me more.
So, you ready for this? At Morningstar, there is no HR department that sets salaries.
Wait, what?
You heard that right. Employees decide their own salaries.
Hold on, hold on. Am I understanding this right? Like, every person gets to just say how much money they make?
It's not a free-for-all. They have a process. It's called the Colleague Letter of Understanding. So basically, every year, each employee, they kind of write their own job description.
Okay.
They lay out their goals for the year.
Okay.
And yes, they propose their own salary.
I bet that's an interesting conversation. Okay, so how do they, like, prevent everyone from just, going crazy and asking for, like, $1 bazillion and bankrupting the company?
Well, it's all about transparency and accountability.
Okay.
So before anyone's salary is finalized, they have to get feedback from their colleagues.
Oh, interesting.
And not just anyone, specifically the people whose work they depend on and the people who depend on their work. So it's about having these open conversations
Interesting.
about, like, people's contributions, what's fair,
Yeah.
just making sure that everyone feels good about it, feels like it reflects their value.
Wow, that's a whole different level, but I kind of like it. It's like they're saying, we trust you. Like, we trust you to know your worth and, obviously to have those conversations. Okay, so we've got the advice process, we've got self-set salaries. Any other unusual practices from these Teal organizations that stood out to you?
Well, Laloux talks about this group of mental health hospitals in Germany, Heiligenfeld, and they use something called Tingsha bells in their meetings.
Tingsha bells.
Yeah.
Are we talking like a meditation break in the middle of like a budget meeting? What's going on there?
Not exactly. So picture this. You're in a meeting at Heiligenfeld. Anyone, it could be anyone in the room, if they're feeling like the conversation is getting off track, maybe it's getting disrespectful, or someone's not really embodying those Teal principles,
Yeah.
they can ring these Tingsha bells
Oh, interesting.
just to pause everything.
Time out?
Yeah, like a little reset
I
button
love that.
to say, hey, are we really being collaborative here? Are we honoring each other?
I like a gentle reminder.
Hmm.
I love that. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our Teal deep dive here.
Yeah.
This has been really eye-opening for me. I hope it has been for everybody listening as well.
Yeah.
It's clear these Teal organizations are doing things so differently. But I think the big question is, like, what does this all mean for those of us who aren't lucky enough to be working at Bertzorg or Morningstar, right?
Okay.
Like, what can we take from this, even if we're not in a position to, completely overhaul our workplaces?
I think that's the beauty of it, right? It's not really about like handing you a step-by-step blueprint. It's more about opening up your mind to possibilities. So if something resonated with you today, whether it's the advice process or bringing your whole self to work, whatever it was, ask yourself, how can I bring even a little bit of that into my own work, my own team, my own life?
Right? It's about challenging those assumptions. Like, does it have to be this way? What if there's a better way? And maybe, just maybe, we can start to create those more fulfilling, more purposeful, dare I say, more Teal workplaces ourselves. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will see you on the next deep dive.